Hi everybody, Toby Milroy here again, Vice President for AMS. Thanks so much for tuning into this quick video. This is the second in our series on how to create ironclad retention in your martial arts school, all sponsored by Atlas Martial Arts Software, part of our Martial Arts Business 101 series. So remember in the last session we talked about the first key to mastering your student retention is really knowing where it is right now, right? Understanding what your current numbers are, letting the numbers in your business show you how you're performing, right? And we discussed that anything over 5% dropout a month and you've got an issue on your hands. The top 10, top 20% of the schools in the industry are dropping out less than 4% a month. Some are dropping out 2%, 3%, and the rare occasion like 1% a month, right? Now again, if you count that in the right way, I count students who are either not coming or they're not current on their tuition. Either one to me is that they're not active. So you take the number of inactive over the number of active, and that's your attrition rate. So again, the first key to ironclad student retention is knowing what your current retention is and understanding whether this is something, understanding how high of a priority this is for you in your overall business growth strategy. Obviously, we can always improve. But if I'm only dropping out, 2% a month or 2.5% a month or 3% a month, I might need to focus my energy some other places to maximize my growth for now, right? So that was the key number one. Key number two, I hesitate to quantify what order these should come into or qualify what order they should come. But I'll just say this. Obviously, the number one biggest factor in the quality of your student retention is what you're doing in the classroom, right? How engaging your classes are, how engaging your instructors are, how their ability and level to communicate with students, their ability to communicate and engage with families and parents and the adults that are in classes. However, we're going to punt on that one today. We're not going to talk specifically about managing the classroom today. I have the 12 class management commandments and a few other strategies for you for the next video. But for today, what I thought we would do is discuss the next in order of the customer experience. So the next thing that the customer would experience, the next thing the student would experience is what I'll call now the second key to high-level student retention, and that's their level of understanding of how your program works as they enroll. And I'll say it more structurally, how solid of an enrollment was it to begin with, right? So here's what I mean by that. What do your students, when they enroll in your program, when they sign up, so to speak, when they say yes to you, and they say, yep, I want to do lessons, sign me up, or tell me what I have to do, right? What is their perception of what they're agreeing to? What is their perception of what your program is about and about the logistics thereof? And here's what I mean by that. This encompasses much, much, much more than just whether you should use contracts or not use contracts. This encompasses much, much, much more than should I do month-to-month agreements or 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, right? This is a much more vast and broad topic. And I wanted to sort of peel back the layers on that today and perhaps answer questions and concerns that you may have about it or that our industry in general has about it by saying this. Harvard University has like an 86% retention rate, an 86% graduation rate, right? I think 87% graduation rate, which means they drop out 13% of their students. 13% of their students don't graduate in 4 years. Which is 13, so that's 6.5% a year, that 6.5% for half a year, 3.25% a year, so that's less than 0.2%, 0.3% a month dropping out, right? So Harvard University drops out less than 3% a year. Most martial arts schools can't not drop out more than 3% from January to February, from 1 month to the next, right? And psychologically, the fundamental most important reason that Harvard has such a good graduation rate is not how good their instructors are, although they have a great staff, right? It's not how great their classes really are, right? Although they're fantastic. I've done lots of training on Harvard campus. I've taken all sorts of our mastermind groups and things like that to Harvard to study how Harvard does its admissions process and how it structures its classes and programs and fundamentals and how it raises funds and things like that. One of the things that I've learned though is that the most critical piece of Harvard's retention success is the fact basically that everybody who enrolls in Harvard is committed to graduating from Harvard. Does that make sense? So if you took Harvard and contrasted that with, for example, the local community college, right? People don't go to Harvard or Yale or Air Force Academy or West Point or whatever, very high level university you may want to choose. People mostly don't go there and say, I'm just going to enroll for a semester, take a couple classes, kick the tires, and see if this is something I really want to do, right? That's completely not their psychological condition. Their psychological condition when they enroll at Harvard is, I'm going to graduate, I'm going to have the Harvard certificate on my wall when I go and open my company, or when I go and work for Google, or when I go and build a new corporation or something like that, build a new business, right? They've already psychologically committed to the result, the diploma on the wall, and what that means to them before they've enrolled, before they've signed on the dotted line, right? Now, again, on the very far other end of the spectrum is something like, like a community college, or maybe like a little online course that you get from like Udemy or something like that, where really there's no level of commitment. It's not really much money either. It's kind of cheap, right? It's very inexpensive compared to Harvard, right? $42,000 a year, I think, something like that right now. Low level of commitment. Also, relatively low a level of attention given in class to, individuals and things like that as well. So if that's the spectrum, right? If the spectrum is, sort of community college on one end and Harvard, their retention ratios anyway on the other end, then it's a really important lesson for us to learn as an industry. It's a really important lesson for us to learn as individual school operators that what that student is thinking the day that they enroll has a huge impact in how long that they'll actually stay with the program, right? If they're signing up, if they're enrolling and it's just, hey, listen, Mr. Jones, you just come in for this month. If you want to take classes, you drop into class whenever you want to. You can maybe exam for the next rank if you get enough class credits in the next 6 or 8 or 10 months or whatever. We're not really concerned about that. You just kind of pop in whenever you like, right? Now, again, I'm not going to make a form an opinion about that, other than I know statistically, beyond any shadow of any doubt, based on all of the facts that I've seen across our entire industry in some of the largest organizations on the planet, with the NATMA association members, with our clients here inside the billing organization, with the clients I've coached with and consulted with, and with some of the largest martial arts associations on the planet. I can tell you beyond any shadow of a doubt that if the student enrolls and they have no level of commitment psychologically, forget contracts for a minute, forget what they're writing their name on. If they psychologically don't have much of a commitment to the program, they're going to be dropping out at a pretty high rate. Because just like the person trying out a class in community college, when they get to an examination, when they get to a midterm that's really, really, really hard, maybe I just won't go back, right? But at Harvard, you've already committed to the outcome. You've psychologically committed to having that diploma on the wall, to getting that degree. And if you come across a midterm that's a little tougher, you're going to figure out how to get through it, right? You're going to, collect all the resources that you need and get help and get tutoring and get a teaching fellow or a teaching assistant to help you through the problems that you're having, right? But at the community college, maybe it's just not for me, right? So I think it's fundamentally important for your retention, for your student retention, is to make very clear at the point of enrollment, at the point of engagement with that new student, what the terms of the enrollment are, what it is exactly that they're doing, right? And the more you can get them psychologically committed to the outcome, the better. And that's an important distinction. It's an important distinction. I'm not talking about they're now psychologically committed to, hey, I want to learn bow staff in 2 years when I'm a purple belt or blue belt, right? Or, hey, I'm really excited about learning the commas when I can, when I'm a red belt or whatever the case is. All of that's very useful and very important, but really it's all about the outcome. It's all about what is it exactly that I'm trying to accomplish in this program. Even in the weight loss model, in the United States especially, there are some weight loss programs that are, you pay a tuition and you get the food this month and that's the gig, right? That's the deal. But there are other programs where you enroll for a specific program. You're taking the, lose 15 pounds program, and that program is going to take, maybe 3 months, and here's what you're going to do to be able to get there. It's going to take you about 12 weeks to get there, but here's our objective. What you're really buying, so to speak, is the outcome, the objective, the I've lost the 10-pound thing, right? So I think it's critically important as a martial arts school you identify that. You identify the reality of fundamental human behavior, fundamental human psychology, and you build your program appropriately. Now, what does that look like where the rubber meets the road, right? And again, this may be a little controversial, but it really shouldn't be. The facts are this. If your students are on a month-to-month agreement with really no level of commitment, the attrition rate, your dropout rate, just by the psychological reality of how they think about your program, your dropout rate will be higher. If students are enrolling on some kind of a term agreement, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, whatever, if it's some kind of a term agreement, that automatically helps your retention. Now, there are two pieces of that you have to be, I think you want to be very concerned about, very conscious about. Don't think even for a second what I'm trying to say is get them to sign a contract, therefore they're trapped into the membership with you, and if they get disgruntled, you're going to sue them when they break if they try to get out of their contract, and you're going to send them off to collections, if they miss a payment or something like that. Don't think for a minute that that's what I'm saying. My case, my record, in fact, is that all of my students have always been on a term agreement, either 1 year, 3 years, or 4. I've always used a professional billing company to manage all that for me. I've always outsourced that work. I've never wanted my own staff dealing with that. But I've never, in my history ever, sent a student to collections or to court over breaking a contract. So the question is then why use contracts, right? Then why even ask somebody to be on a membership of any term? And here's the fundamentally important answer. Because their psychological condition on the way into the membership, on the way into the program, is fundamentally important. In their mind, I want them thinking about my program in terms of an outcome, not in terms of a month or 2 or 3, right? So here's what I think is most important for you to stay focused on. What is the highest point of leverage for you, right, as a school operator? If students are thinking about your program like a health club, for lack of a better description, the numbers that we see every month here in the billing division, I can tell you beyond any shadow of a doubt, the attrition rate for month-to-month folks is much higher. The retention rate, the keep rate for people who are on some type of a term agreement is much better, right? Their attrition rate is much lower. Now, again, this isn't about trapping somebody into a contract. Like I said, I've never sent anybody to collections, never would. You may want to, that's totally fine with me. I think that's completely legitimate. But here's why it's so important. If you're not going to do that, then why have a contract, right? Well, here's why. If you have a great relationship with your students, right, that's the most important factor. But someday, every student is going to have a challenge that's difficult for them to accomplish, right? And in fact, one of the things that I tell all of our parents while they're enrolling is, Mrs. Jones, one of the things that I'm absolutely certain of is one day Johnny is going to come downstairs and say, Mom, martial arts is getting really hard. I think I want to quit, right? Now, the biggest frustration that I see that schools tell me about is, especially when they're operating like this, is a student dropped out and they have no idea where they went, right? Just one day, Billy stopped coming to class. We've been trying to call him. We've emailed him. We've text messaged him. We've done everything we can do. But he's just disappeared like into thin air, right? That's very frustrating for a school operator. Well, why does that happen? Some in our industry may argue that if you have a good enough quality, if you have a good quality relationship with your customers, with your students and their families, they'll come to you when they might want to drop out, right? When they're having difficulty, when they're having challenges, when they're in that sort of C student, wavering category, right? But when you really look at human psychology, human behavior, how people really actually behave, not what we think they should do, but what they actually do, is, to be honest, the better the quality of the relationship that you have with them, the less likely, statistically, the less likely that they are to come and tell you that they've decided to quit. Does that make sense? Because they don't want to. They don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to admit to you that they've decided to quit, right? They don't want to admit to you. They don't want to face you, and they respect you. They love you. They've known you for years in some cases, right? And they know they shouldn't quit. They know they shouldn't let their son or daughter drop out. They know they shouldn't acquiesce. They know they shouldn't. They know they should manage the situation better. So they don't really want to kind of come to you and admit that they've failed, that they're having a challenge with that, right? So if their agreement, if the structure of their program is simply month to month, cancel with 30 days notice, whatever, well, they're not going to come to you when they're having a problem. They're just going to disappear and you're never going to see them again, right? I mean, statistically, we see that all the time. I'll work on pulling out some numbers and make some graphs and stuff like that for you if you like, but we see it all the time here, looking at hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of schools' numbers, their actual numbers. We see this happen. And then we have obviously an entire division of people who are calling students all day long, every day, when they haven't been to class or when they're delinquent on their payments or whatever the case might be. And we hear what they're saying. We record it all. We know what they're saying. And sometimes they'll admit to us some things that they won't admit to you as the instructor, right? So I guess I would say this. Their psychological level of commitment to you is critically important. Or, I'm sorry, commitment to the program, commitment to the outcome is the most important factor early on in the relationship. Now, if they have some level of psychological commitment and they're on some type of a term agreement that they've agreed to, right? Maybe it's 6 months or 12 months or whatever. I prefer 12. But we can talk about that later. By the way, if you have challenges with that, if you have challenges getting effectively having students enroll on term agreements, we can help you with that. We can absolutely fix it. There's something that we call the linear sales process. And if you use the linear sales model, you will never have an objection over the contract, ever, right? We solved this many years ago. And it's very simple, very easy, very straightforward, and very authentic. It's not slick or in any way deceptive. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's totally transparent. But my point is that, and any of our people here at AMS headquarters can help you with that. So just give them a call here, and they can walk you through that process. If you're a current client, they'll help you with all that stuff. So the fundamental point is this: if they're on a term agreement and they've made a psychological commitment to the outcome, now when Johnny comes downstairs one morning and says, Mom, martial arts is, I think I just want to, take a break and try something else. Or I think I want to quit. Or I think, something else has attracted my interest and I want to try something different, right? Well, now it's very difficult for them to just disappear, right? Now they sort of have to come and talk to you, right? They're more obligated psychologically to make sure that they come to you and describe to you what's happening, therefore giving you the opportunity to fix that problem, right? Now, I personally believe that is a much more ethical way to run a martial arts business. And here's what I mean by that. This is my personal opinion. It's critically important that we have the opportunity to engage with every student who exits our school, right? And the reason I think that's so important is because I think you would all agree there are times where a student may have had a negative experience in class, or perhaps a negative experience outside of class, that we can fix, right? And I think we have the responsibility to fix it, not just let that situation stand. So here would be an example. It's a bad example, but it's a decent example for today's purposes. Let's say a student was like a blue belt or something like that, and they've been sparring maybe for 7 or 8 months or something like that, and they were in your school, maybe they were doing some sparring, maybe they got kicked a little hard, something like that. You know, something like that happened, something that probably shouldn't have happened, right? And we know that this happens occasionally in our schools, right? Well, it didn't hurt them so much physically as it hurts their confidence a little bit, right? It kind of chips away at their belief in themselves. It kind of chips away at their belief in what they've learned and how they're applying it, right? Now, I personally think it's a crime if we allow that student who's now had their confidence somewhat damaged by our school, by what we've done in our school. I think it's a crime to let them just disappear and go off into the universe, go off into the world, being worse off for having attended that class rather than better off for having attended that class. Does that make sense? So again, if the student is psychologically committed to the outcome and they have some type of a term agreement, something that they now are incentivized to come and speak to you about. There's some leverage now, right? They don't want to just disappear. They want to come and talk to you about this and see what they can do about this agreement, see what they can do to work this out. That's exactly what you want. You want to be able to speak to them. You want to be able to fix that situation. Not only are there business reasons for that, of course there are. We want to keep the student if we at all can, right? But even more than that, I don't want that student going out into the world having his confidence lower than what it was when he came to class the day before. Does that make sense? So for me, it's all about win-win, right? Or no deal. If the student isn't winning and the parent isn't winning and the school isn't winning, then there's no reason to be engaging in this, right? So it's either win-win or no deal with me, right? So I need to be able to serve that student at the highest level. Now again, the counter argument is if you have a good enough quality of relationship with the student, they're going to come to you and talk to you about this anyway. And that's true only to a point. There is also a point where you have such a good relationship with them. You're so deeply ingrained in their psyche, and your school is such a community hub for them that when they do have a situation like that, oftentimes they're embarrassed to come and admit it to you. They're embarrassed to come and describe that to you, and they love you so much, they put you on such a pedestal that they don't want to admit to you that they're making a bad decision or they're making a mistake. Does that make sense? So the number 2 key to maximizing your student retention is the terms of your engagement, the terms of your program. Is it a month-to-month, drop in whenever you want, take class credits, hop in, hop out whenever you want to? Or is it a very organized, curriculum-driven, I'm enrolling in a blue belt program or whatever it is, a black belt program or an orientation program or whatever it is, and that program has specific objectives, and I'm taking lessons to be able to accomplish those objectives, but I'm definitely not trading, a few dollars a month for access to the facility. Really what I'm doing is I'm buying a program and I'm dividing the program cost up into monthly installments, right? This is a much statistically much better strategy for you and your school. Now, let me say it differently. It's a much better strategy statistically for schools in general, right? Now, of course, you can run a successful school and not use a term agreement. Of course you can. Of course you can run a successful school and have incredibly tight term agreements, right? I'm talking about statistically over our entire industry. when you look at a broad sampling, a big sampling of schools, I can show you a significant statistical difference between here and here. And here is better, right? Here will help you much more in your attrition fight, right? In your ability to manage student attrition as well. So I hope that was useful for you. More to come very soon. In our third segment for mastering student retention, we're going to be talking about how to master the classroom, how to implement the 12 class management commandments, and ways to make sure that the classroom is exciting and engaging every time, and that it also engages the people who are not in class. And we'll talk about that next time. Thanks so much. Speak to you soon.